Okay, let's dive deep. Today we're digging into a really fascinating part of the historical record, 2 Chronicles, chapter 29.
hmm
It's this striking story about a new king, Hezekiah, who steps in and finds things in, well, a real mess.
That's right, King Hezekiah. He's 25 when he becomes king in Jerusalem. And the record says he reigned for 29 years. We even know his mother's name, Abijah, daughter of Zechariah.
And straight off the bat, you get this key detail about him, don't you? It says he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. That link to David feels really important,
Oh, absolutely. It's signaling a major shift, a break from what had been going on just before him. Because, yeah, the situation he inherited, it was pretty bad.
especially with the temple, right? The spiritual heart of the kingdom.
Exactly. It had fallen into really serious neglect, just abandoned almost.
And Hezekiah, he doesn't gloss over why things are so bad. He names the cause.
No, he confronts it directly. He says, quite bluntly, "Our fathers were unfaithful. They did evil in the eyes of the Lord our God and forsook him." He puts it down to them deliberately turning away.
And it wasn't just a vague spiritual thing, was it? There were specific actions, physical things happening or rather not happening at the temple.
Yeah, very specific. He talks about how they turned their faces away from the Lord's dwelling place and turned their backs on him. You get the sense of a conscious physical rejection.
Turning their backs. Wow. So what did that actually look like inside the temple? What happened because of that?
Well, the text lists it out pretty clearly. They shut the doors of the portico, the main entranceway, basically locked it up.
Okay.
They put out the lamps so the sanctuary was dark. They stopped burning incense, which was, a central part of worship.
Right.
And they completely stopped the burnt offerings at the sanctuary. The fundamental acts of sacrifice, gone.
So the whole system had just ground to a halt. And Hezekiah makes a direct link between that religious failure and the suffering the nation was experiencing.
He does, and that's a really powerful point in the text. This idea that spiritual unfaithfulness has real, tangible consequences in the world. He says straight up, "Therefore, the anger of the Lord has fallen on Judah and Jerusalem."
And what did that look like for the people? What form did this anger take?
He says the nation became an object of dread and horror and scorn to everyone around them. And then he makes it very personal, very concrete. He says, this is why our fathers have fallen by the sword and why our sons and daughters and our wives are in captivity.
Wow. So defeat, death, exile, all trace back to abandoning the temple worship.
That's the connection the text makes, yeah. A really bleak inheritance for Hezekiah.
It really is. But what's amazing is how quickly he acts. He doesn't just sit there lamenting.
Not at all. It says in the first month of the first year of his reign, he gets to work. First thing, he opens and repairs those temple doors that had been shut.
The symbolic first step.
Very symbolic, but also necessary, right?
Yeah.
Opening the way back in.
And who does he call on first to help with this huge task?
The priests and the Levites. The very people designated for temple service, who obviously hadn't been doing it. He gathers them in the square on the east side.
And he lays it on the line for them.
Oh yeah, no soft-pedaling it. He tells them, "Listen to me, Levites. Consecrate yourselves now and consecrate the temple of the Lord." He's saying you need to get yourselves right spiritually, and then you need to physically clean this place up.
Consecrate, set apart for sacred use. Purify.
Exactly. And he commands them, remove all defilement from the sanctuary, get rid of all the accumulated mess, basically.
And he's very clear about why he's doing all this. What's the ultimate goal?
His goal is reconciliation with God. He says, "Now I intend to make a covenant with the Lord so that his fierce anger will turn away from us." It's all about restoring that broken relationship.
And he gives the Levites a bit of a pep talk, too. Reminds them of their role.
He does. He says, "My sons, do not be negligent now. Don't be like the previous generation." He reminds them why they were chosen. "For the Lord has chosen you to stand before him and serve him, to minister before him and to burn incense." He's calling them back to who they're supposed to be.
Okay, so that's the charge. How do the Levites take it?
The text says simply, they set to work immediately. No hesitation recorded.
And it even names names, doesn't it? Which makes it feel very real.
It does. Mahath, Joel, Kish, Azariah, Joah. A whole list. It shows this wasn't just an order given, it was real people rolling up their sleeves.
So how did they actually do the cleaning? What were the steps involved?
Well, first, they gathered their brothers, the other Levites, and they consecrated themselves. Personal purification first.
Right, you have to be clean to clean the holy place.
Exactly. Then they went into the temple to purify it, following the king's orders and, importantly, following the word of the Lord. So it's both royal command and divine instruction driving this.
And the priests had a specific role inside.
Yes, the priests went into the inner sanctuary, the holiest part, to purify it. They brought out anything unclean they found in there into the temple courtyard.
And then the Levites took over.
That's right. The Levites took all that defilement from the courtyard and carried it out of the city down to the Kidron Valley, which was often, the place where unclean things were disposed of.
Taking out the trash, spiritually speaking.
Pretty much, yeah. Removing all that accumulated uncleanness.
And the thing that really jumps out is how fast they did all this.
It's incredible, the timeline. They started on day 1 of the first month. By day 8, they'd done the outer parts, the portico. And by the 16th day, just 16 days total, they'd finished purifying the entire temple building.
16 days. That's intense.
It really speaks to the urgency and the dedication they must have had.
So the place is clean. What happens next? They report back.
Yep. They go to King Hezekiah and give him the update.
What do they tell him specifically?
They confirmed the job was done. We have purified the entire temple of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the table for setting out the consecrated bread with all its articles. They covered all the key elements.
And they mentioned something about items that King Ahaz, the previous unfaithful king, had messed with.
Yes, that's a really significant detail. They say, we have prepared and consecrated all the articles that King Ahaz removed in his unfaithfulness. They are now in front of the Lord's altar. So it wasn't just cleaning, it was restoration. Putting things back right.
Okay, so the physical space is ready. Time to actually use it for worship again. How does that start?
It starts the very next morning. Hezekiah gathers the city officials, important that the civic leaders are involved too, and they all go up to the temple together.
And they bring a specific offering, a sin offering. What was that about?
They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 male lambs, and 7 male goats. Quite a lot. And it was a sin offering specifically for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah.
So covering all the bases, leadership, the place itself, the people.
Exactly. A corporate act of atonement, acknowledging the collective failure.
What did the ritual actually involve?
Well, the king ordered the priests, the descendants of Aaron, who were authorized for this, to offer the animals. They were slaughtered, and the priests took the blood and sprinkled it on the altar. That blood ritual was key to the idea of atonement covering the sin.
And there was something specific about offering for all Israel, not just Judah.
Yeah, that's interesting. The goats for the sin offering were brought before the whole assembly, and the people laid their hands on them. Symbolizing the transfer of the community's sin onto the animals. Then the priests slaughtered those goats and used their blood specifically to atone for all Israel.
Huh. Even though it was just Judah there.
Right. The text says the king ordered the offering for all Israel, showing the sense of connection, maybe a hope for broader restoration beyond just Judah.
Okay, so atonement is made.
Yeah.
The relationship is, hopefully, being repaired. Now for the actual worship service. Music seems to have been a big part.
Huge part. Hezekiah stations the Levites with their instruments, cymbals, harps, lyres. The sound comes back to the temple.
And it wasn't just any old music.
No, the source makes a point of saying it was done in the way prescribed by David and Gad the king's seer and Nathan the prophet, and that this way was commanded by the Lord through his prophets.
So they were deliberately going back to an established, authorized pattern of worship, not making it up as they went along.
Exactly. Restoring the authentic tradition.
How did the music fit in with the sacrifices?
It was perfectly timed. The Levites had their string instruments, the priests had trumpets, when Hezekiah signaled for the burnt offering to start.
Yeah.
As the offering began, singing to the Lord began also, accompanied by trumpets and the instruments of David, king of Israel. Sacrifice and praise happening together.
And the people weren't just watching.
No way. The whole assembly bowed in worship while the singers sang and the trumpeters played. It was this full active participation that went on until the burnt offering was completely finished.
And then a final act of worship.
Yes, after the offerings, the king and everyone there knelt down and worshipped. Just this collective posture of reverence.
And Hezekiah even told the Levites what to sing.
He did. He told them to use the words of David and of Asaph the seer, likely referring to known psalms. And they responded, singing with gladness and bowing down again. You really get a sense of joy returning.
So, temple's clean, atonement's made, worship is back on track, led by the king and officials. What about the ordinary people?
Hezekiah turns to them next. He says basically, okay, you have now dedicated yourselves to God, so come on, bring your own sacrifices and thank offerings. It's an invitation for personal response.
And how did they respond?
Overwhelmingly. The text says the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all whose hearts were willing brought burnt offerings. There was this outpouring of generosity.
And the numbers mentioned are just huge.
They really are. 70 bulls, 100 rams, 200 lambs just for the burnt offerings, and then another 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep and goats for other sacrifices. It's massive.
So massive, it actually caused a bit of a practical problem.
Yeah, this is a fascinating detail. It says, the priests, however, were too few to skin all the burnt offerings. There were just too many animals coming in for the number of priests available to handle that specific task.
So who stepped in?
So their kinsmen, the Levites, helped them until the task was finished and until other priests had been consecrated. The Levites pitched in to help process everything.
And the text gives a reason why the Levites were able to jump in like that. This part really struck me.
It's incredible, isn't it? It adds this little note. For the Levites had been more conscientious in consecrating themselves than the priests had been.
Wow. So their personal readiness, their diligence in getting themselves right with God, actually equipped them to serve more effectively, even beyond their usual roles when the need arose.
Exactly. It suggests that personal dedication can sometimes outpace even institutional roles or maybe initial preparedness. It's a powerful observation.
It really is. So despite that bottleneck, the overall picture is one of incredible abundance.
Absolutely. There were burnt offerings in abundance. Worship was back, full force, overflowing with people's participation. The service of the temple was truly reestablished.
And what's the final feeling captured in the text?
It ends on a note of pure joy and recognition of God's hand in it all. Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced at what God had brought about for his people because it was done so quickly.
That speed again, they saw it as miraculous, really.
It seems like it. The speed and the scale felt like more than just human effort. It felt like God working rapidly among them.
So wrapping up this look at chapter 29, we've gone from this pit of neglect and its awful consequences through Hezekiah's decisive leadership, this incredibly rapid cleansing process, solemn act of atonement, and then this explosion of joyful, generous worship.
It really covers the whole arc of repentance and restoration. You see the cost of turning away, but then you see the energy, the focus, the collective effort needed to turn back, leadership, willing hearts, specific actions, acknowledging failure, restoring proper practice. It's all there.
And it feels like more than just an ancient story about fixing up a building. It's about what it takes to restore something vital that's been broken, whether it's a relationship with God or maybe even other things in our lives or communities.
Right. The principles resonate, recognizing the problem, taking decisive action, the importance of both leadership and individual responsibility, and the joy that comes with restoration.
And maybe a final thought for you to chew on, picking up on that detail about the Levites. What does that contrast tell us? You have the initial negligence that Hezekiah condemned, but then you have these Levites being more conscientious than even the priests. What does that reveal about where real readiness, real dedication often comes from when you're facing a huge task of renewal? Something to think about.